Hi, this is Skylar with Regan Capital. Today we're going to talk about investing in bonds with an inverted rate curve. I have up on my screen here the current rate curve, which is grossly inverted and has been for almost 2 years now, where we have short-term rates at about 540, long-term rates at about 465. And just for illustrative purposes, I put in this curve from 20 years ago, which is normal. It's a steep curve where you have short-term rates under 1, long-term rates very similarly at about 450. And I want to pull up this file that we put together, which talks about investing in a bond ladder. You might have heard the term rolling down the curve. And so we have the curve down here, and I just wanted to put in years 1 through 5 to think about investing in a short-term bond ladder. And you have the 2004 curve down here, the present curve up here. So take a look at owning the 5-year here. So if you went and bought that 5-year bond 20 years ago at 3.2% yield, your duration about 470, what will happen over the course of a year is you will roll down the curve. You'll go from right here to effectively right there. Whereas in today's curve, you're going to go from here, you're going to roll up the curve slightly. Okay, so what does that mean from a total return perspective? So when you roll down the curve from 320 to 272, that differential is about 48 basis points. You multiply that 48 basis points, call it a half, times your duration of 4.7. That is a gain, a capital gain of 2.25%. So you add your coupon or your current yield that you buy it at to your capital gain, you get a total return over the course of that 1 year of owning that 5-year bond of 5.46%. But fast forward to today, you're investing at a higher yield, but over the course of 1 year, you're going to roll up the curve approximately 7 basis points. You multiply that 7 basis points times your duration, you lose a little bit of money. You have a negative capital gain or an unrealized loss. Okay. But you look at your statement at the end of 1 year, or if you have to sell that bond in 1 year, you're actually going to lose money. Or you're only going to make 4.17 when you thought you were going to make 4.48. So in an inverted curve, I would not suggest going out and just owning a bond ladder. I would suggest potentially staying short. And if you need duration, go out and buy duration, buy paper out here. Okay. So if we look at this curve today, you have short-term rates at about 540, the 30-year at about 466. We have had an inverted curve here for a very long time, almost 2 years. You got to go back to this is 3s to 30, which is about a year and a half. If you look at 2 to 10, almost 2 years. So what's the solution? You can go, and this is PX1. Let's look at PX1. You can go and own money markets at 540. Okay. And I want to flip to this curve here real quick as well, because this is the forward SOFR curve that determines floating rate assets and what they float off of. The bulk of floating rate assets in the world are floating off of SOFR, used to be LIBOR. So the front end of SOFR is at about 540, the long end's at about 380. That's only about 3 years out. That implies about 6 Fed cuts. There's about 4 Fed cuts implied over the next year or so. If you got to next May, it's about 440. Okay. So going back to here, looking at T-bills, this is PX1 in Bloomberg. One thing you could do is you can go out and you can buy floating rate treasuries. Okay. There's about 8 or 9 issuances that Treasury issues floating rate paper. If we look at this bond here, this is the January of 2026 floating rate Treasury bond. Okay. That current yield there is about 544. So you're picking up 4 to 10 basis points, call it, owning a floating rate Treasury bond versus owning fixed rate Treasury bonds. Let's look at JP Morgan. You can go buy corporate floaters. This is JPM Corp on Bloomberg. If you own the floating rate instrument, which matures in 2028, you're getting a 6.08 yield. If you own the fixed rate bond, almost the same maturity, you're only getting a 527 yield. So difference of about 80 basis points. You're going to gain about 80 basis points owning the floater versus owning the fixed rate bond. If we look at mortgage bonds, so current coupon mortgage bond, the bond you buy at around par is about 6%. If you go out and you buy an agency floating rate bond, this is a new issue agency floater that's also trading at par. You get a 6.5% yield at par. For a yield to spot, if the curve stays to the spot rate, you're going to get about a 658 yield. And if the forward curve actually happens, we can run into F here, you're still going to get a 556 yield. So you're still going to actually beat bills. But over the course of time, you're going to get 120, 135 spread over treasuries by owning agency government guaranteed floating rate mortgage bonds. So looking at the curve today, where it's inverted, many of the same tricks that allow bonds to do well over time, i.e. owning a bond ladder and rolling down the curve, they don't apply. Why is that? Because you own fixed coupons. How do you invest in an inverted curve? You turn that logic or you turn that math on its head. You own floating rate paper. You own paper that's floating off of this part of the curve. And even treasuries are going to give you an extra 5 to 10 basis points. Corporates are going to give you an extra 80 basis points. Mortgage bonds are going to give you an extra 100 to 120 basis points versus owning treasuries. So turn bond investing on its head, flip the switch and own floating rate paper when the curve's inverted. Thank you.